What would you do if you had to disappear from civilization forever? In 1936, a Russian family made that exact choice, fleeing deep into the Siberian wilderness to escape religious persecution. They would remain hidden for over 40 years, raising children who had never seen another human being outside their own family. Until one day, a helicopter changed everything. In the summer of 1978, Soviet geologists were flying over the Siberian taiga near the Abakan River. Their mission was to search for mineral deposits in this untouched region. The landscape below was one of the most desolate places on Earth. Endless trees, mountains, and glacial rivers. Finding any trace of human life seemed nearly impossible. But as the pilot descended, geologist Galina Pizmenskaya noticed something strange. Between the mountains, deep in the valley, there was a field. But this was no ordinary field. Its geometric lines clearly showed it had been worked by hand. This was 250 kilometers from the nearest settlement. The closest village required days of grueling travel on foot. "No one can live here," Pizmenskaya said, but below, someone clearly had. The team returned a few days later. This time, they were determined to land. The helicopter touched down in a clearing, and 4 geologists began walking toward the mysterious field. As they ventured deeper into the forest, they felt just how far they were from civilization. This was a place time had forgotten. Then, through the trees, a hut appeared, or what could be called a hut. It was made of logs and moss, half buried in the earth. The roof looked like it was collapsing. There were no windows, only a dark entrance and faint smoke rising from within. As the geologists approached, they froze. In the doorway stood an elderly man dressed in rags. His hair and beard reached down to his knees. His face was blackened from the sun. His hands were calloused from work. The man's eyes filled with terror and shock. The two groups stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, the old man spoke. His Russian was archaic, an ancient dialect, as if he had come from centuries past. "What will happen now?" he whispered.
The old man's name was Agafia Lykov, and his story began in 1936. The Lykov family were members of a Russian Orthodox sect known as Old Believers. This group had rejected the reforms of the Russian Orthodox Church in the 17th century. For centuries, they had been persecuted. Under Stalin, the oppression became unbearable. Karp lived in a village with his wife Akulina and their 2 young children, Savin and Natalia. In 1936, a terrible event occurred. Communist authorities raided the village. Before Karp's eyes, his brother was killed by a soldier. His crime was remaining faithful to his religion. That night, Karp made a difficult decision. He would disappear forever with his family. With only a few seeds on their backs, a pot, some clothes, and their faith, the Lykovs began walking into the Siberian wilderness. They traveled deeper and deeper, farther into isolation. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Finally, they reached a deep valley surrounded by mountains near the Abakan River. This would be it, a place completely isolated from the rest of the world, 250 kilometers from civilization. This was their new home. The first years were a thin line between survival and death. Karp and Akulina dug a shelter from the earth with their hands. This half-underground, half-hut structure was their only chance against the brutal Siberian winters. Winters could drop to minus 40 degrees Celsius. Snow would pile up meters thick. Finding food was a constant battle. They planted the seeds they had brought, potatoes, carrots, peas. But the Siberian soil was cruel. The summer season was very short. Frosts came early. The first few harvests were disasters. Most of the plants died before they could grow. They starved for days. They ate tree bark. They chewed pine cones. They boiled wild grasses. Akulina never stopped giving her own portion to feed her children. In 1940, the family's third child, Dmitri, was born. Then in 1943, the fourth child, Agafia, came into the world. These children would see only the 4 members of their family from the moment they were born. They would have no knowledge of the outside world. They would never hear of World War II. They would never hear of Stalin's death. They would never learn that humanity had set foot on the moon. For them, time had stopped in 1936. Dmitri and Agafia grew up without any concept of the modern world. Akulina taught them to read and write. Their only book was the old Bible that Karp had brought with him. Every evening, by candlelight or the flickering flame of pine tree resin, the family would pray together. The children learned survival skills from their father, Karp: how to set traps, how to hunt, how to fish. Dmitri was especially talented in the forest. He could run fast, even barefoot. He could track animals, wait silently for hours. Agafia learned everything about plants from her mother: which mushrooms were edible, which roots were medicinal, which berries were poisonous, how to tend the small garden, how to sew, every daily task that kept them alive. But life was brutally hard. When their shoes wore out, they made new ones from birch bark. When their clothes became worn, they spun thread from hemp and wove rough fabrics. Everything had to be taken from nature by the labor of their hands. In 1961, tragedy struck. Akulina died of starvation. One year, the harvest had completely failed. The family went hungry for months. Akulina continued to give her own portion to feed her children. Eventually, her body could not endure. Karp buried his wife in deep sorrow. The 4 children were now motherless. But life had to go on. Siberia showed no mercy.
While they struggled to survive in the forest depths, everything was changing in the outside world. Stalin died. The Cold War began. People went to the moon. Television was invented. Airplanes made the world smaller. But the Lykovs knew none of it. Savin and Natalia were now adults, but their home was 250 kilometers from any family shelter. They could not find spouses. They could not make friends. Their only social interaction was talking to each other. Dmitri had become an incredible hunter. He could run barefoot in the snow for hours. He could track a deer for days and catch it with his bare hands. But he had never spoken to another human being besides his own family. Agafia was 35 years old and had seen only 3 people since she was born: her father, her 2 brothers, and her sister. She could not even imagine another woman's face. In summers, they would work in their fields. They would carefully plant seeds, tend to each plant with care. If a harvest failed, winter would be spent in hunger. If it succeeded, perhaps they would live. In winters, they would shut themselves in their hut. They would burn pine wood to heat the small room, most of the smoke staying inside. Their eyes would water, their lungs would ache, but it was better than freezing to death in the cold. Days passed in silence. They would hear only the howling of the wind, the rustling of trees, and their own voices.
When the geologists first encountered them, the Lykovs were terrified. For 42 years, they had seen no other human being. Now, suddenly, strangers were standing in their garden. Karp did not want to speak at first. He could not understand who these people were or what they wanted. Perhaps they would arrest them? Perhaps they would be punished for their beliefs? But the geologists were kind. They brought gifts: salt, bread, some tools. For the Lykovs, salt was something they had not seen in decades. After Akulina died, their salt had run out. Their food was completely tasteless. Slowly, trust began to form. The geologists began to visit regularly. They told the Lykovs stories about the world. When Karp learned that World War II had happened, he was shocked. A war? Another war? He asked. When he had fled 42 years ago, he could not have imagined another war would occur. Agafia watched the female geologists with fascination. For the first time in her life, she was seeing other women besides her own family. She admired their clothes, their hair, the way they spoke. Dmitri, meanwhile, showed great interest in the helicopter. A machine flying in the sky was pure magic to him.
The geologists offered the Lykovs to return to civilization. They could come to the city, see doctors, live comfortably. Karp firmly refused. "That is not for us," he said. "There we would lose our faith." The children were undecided. Savin and Natalia were aging and wondered whether their lives had to be this difficult. Dmitri could never leave the forest. Agafia wanted to stay with her father. The geologists could not convince them, but regular visits continued. They brought small gifts: pens, paper, some tools. For the Lykovs, these were like treasures. However, in 1981, tragedies began. Savin died of kidney disease. Modern medicine was within reachable distance, but he refused. According to his faith, going to doctors was a sin. A few months later, Natalia also died. The cause was again kidney failure. The family's diet was very low in protein, and this had damaged their kidneys. Karp had lost 2 more of his children. Now only Dmitri and Agafia remained.
In 1988, Karp Lykov died at the age of 87. He had spent 52 years of his life completely isolated from civilization. With his last breath, he told Dmitri and Agafia never to lose their faith. A few months later, Dmitri also died from pneumonia. Modern medicines were just a few kilometers away, but Dmitri refused to use them. Only Agafia remained, alone. She was 45 years old, and for the first time in her life, completely by herself. The geologists and some volunteers continued to visit her regularly. They brought her food and supplies. They tried to convince her to return to civilization. Agafia refused. "This is my home," she said. "My family is buried here. God is here." Years passed. Agafia was aging. She had a heart attack but recovered. She broke her leg but healed. The geologists were astonished. This woman was surviving alone with almost nothing. Today, in the 2020s, Agafia Lykov still lives there. She is now in her late 80s, still in that old hut in the depths of the Siberian wilderness. Volunteers regularly help her. They bring food, firewood, sometimes medical support. But Agafia refuses to return to the modern world. In an interview, she said, "People tell me life is easy in the city, but what good is an easy life? Here I am close to God. My family is here. I cannot leave them." Agafia is the last remaining Lykov in the world. When she was born in 1933, she was born into a world of only 3 people. Today, she lives in a world where billions of people exist, but she still continues a life from 1936 in that old hut, 250 kilometers from civilization. For her, time never moved forward. The Lykov family story is a testament to the incredible power of human will. They sacrificed everything for their faith, comfort, security, even their lives. For 70 years, while the rest of the world changed, they did not. When we think of Agafia today, a question comes to mind. Is she on the right path, or are we? Technology, progress, modern life, do these really matter? Or perhaps is just a hut, a garden, and unwavering faith enough? The answer may be different for everyone, but one thing is certain: Agafia Lykov has found her own answer, and she will never abandon it. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Follow us for more incredible real-life stories of survival, resilience, and the human spirit.